Hello everyone, Richard Lewis here with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about an announcement that was made a few days ago. Lots going on, obviously. We've had, the election craziness. We've had Overwatch making big announcements coming out of BlizzCon. We've had, obviously, some big CS stuff going on and just general internet nonsense. So it's been hard to kind of keep up to date with everything. And if this flew under the radar for you, hopefully this will be enlightening. You might have missed it. So WESA, which is the World Esports Association, you know about them. You've heard about them. We've done videos about them. Basically, it's an offshoot of MTG. They're the principal funders behind it. That's the company that owns DreamHack and owns ESL. And it's tried to look independent, but of course it isn't, and this has been exposed multiple times. Well, it all went quiet for a little bit, and then a few things happened, and that was that they announced the introduction of Ken Hirschman as coming in, somebody with a background in TV, and a very well respected one. I might add, it's quite the hire if you were a TV company, and in addition to that, they recently announced their arbitration court. They're calling it the first arbitration court for esports, and they put out a press release, and I'll just read it to you here. Following up on its commitment to design and implement an easily accessible process for handling a variety of legal issues esports teams and players encounter, WESA is pleased to announce the installation of the WESA Arbitration Court. The arbitration court, although provided by WESA, will operate completely independent of the organization and is open to everyone involved in esports, from players, teams, organizers, and publishers. As a more efficient alternative to lengthy and costly litigation, the arbitration court offers a legal framework that can be used to resolve a range of issues, including contract disputes, prize money payouts and distribution, financial misconduct, and player representation. The issues will be decided by an impartial panel of 3 arbitrators, although the parties can also agree to utilize a single arbitrator or sole arbitrator for certain disputes. The decisions at the end of the confidential proceedings are final, and there are no appeals. The creation of an independent arbitration process is an important step to achieve one of WESA's goals to professionalize esports, said Ken Hirschman, executive chairman and commissioner of WESA. The impartial nature of the arbitration process ensures a variety of issues, from contract disputes to prize money distribution and many others, can be handled expeditiously in a fair, equitable, and cost-effective manner. Having a framework, processes, and a legal body to turn to when needed is an important next step in ensuring that professional gamers and their careers are guarded, said Victor Yenderby, Players Council chairman. With the arbitration court in place, I am confident that players and teams they play for will receive the necessary help and support when needed, and that their interests will be protected. And then it goes up to tell you how you can get in touch with them. And if you have a dispute and want to use this court, you can. Now, a few initial reactions to this. First of all, this is closer to what a esports association should be doing. But unfortunately, the WESA waters have become so muddied and clouded, it's, for me, already kind of dead in those murky waters. I don't really understand what it actually wants to be. It announced that it was going to be a World Esports Association, yet it only brought in teams from Europe. There was no North American representation or South American representation or Asian representation in it. Or Oceanic, it was quite simply a European organization. It brought in teams as founder members, and they were paid. There were financial inducements for joining, which again, that seems a bit odd. I mean, they were talking a lot about how they wanted it to be like FIFA without actually saying, well, FIFA has been involved in lots of corruption and everything else. And this, to me, looks like a very flawed model from the start for esports. It shouldn't work like that. So, first of all, you can drop the W. Second of all, in terms of it being an association, it seems actually what it wanted to be from the get-go was to be a exclusivity club with the purposes of generating financial inducements for the largest teams in Europe to compete exclusively in MTG leagues, in ESL leagues. And of course, I think the wheels have come off a little bit, actually. I mean, we are starting to see WESA teams actively just dropping out of ESL events, which I'm sure has really enraged ESL and certainly enraged the fact that, hang on, you're on WESA, this isn't supposed to be happening. God only knows what kind of private conversations are occurring behind the scenes, but they will be occurring. And especially with the rise of PEA in North America, the fact that ES Force are just buying up everything in Russia and Eastern Europe. I honestly think WESA are going to be very disappointed that there's not a unified front going on at the moment. And then on top of that, you make a hire for somebody whose background is in television. This says to me that what they're looking to do is create an exclusivity league, have all the best teams compete in it, and then basically sell broadcasting rights and sponsorships off the back of that collective brand strength, none of which would make you an association as I have understood it. So the introduction of the arbitration court, which is completely independent, come to that in a second, seems to be more in line with what their original brand was attempting to do. And it should have been endorsed almost like as a matter of course voluntarily by any organization that needs, that understands that we need arbitration and resolution to conflicts in our space, because we absolutely do. Because who can we go to? We can't go to the developer. They've got a dog in the fight. We can't go to the leagues and tournament organizers. They have a dog in a fight. If you're a player, you probably can't go to any of those to resolve an issue with your contracted employer, the team or organization itself. It's all a bit of a mess in terms of how it's structured, and nobody has absolute power or authority. Indeed, it's quite telling that even though this is being called an arbitration court, it is completely voluntary to utilize, and you agree to the any rulings that it makes. But then you can step outside of that and just litigate anyway and get lawyers. There is no appeals. Another point we'll pontificate on in a moment. So it's a bit of a sham, honestly. It's not. It's the illusion of doing something. It's the illusion of having a court which can potentially do something. But ultimately, if you're not happy with it, you just go and get a lawyer and resolve the issue that way. So kind of defeats the purpose. The only people that will have to abide by the rulings will be those that cannot get representation. And as we're seeing increasingly in esports, there's a lot of lawyers wanting to get in, and they're willing to do pro bono work. The idea about litigation being incredibly expensive is kind of not as true as it was, and certainly more and more people are willing to do pro bono work so they can get in the space and then move forward and earn money. Players will always have that financial disconnect. Organizations usually have their own counsel anyway, but anyway, this is a cul-de-sac that we shouldn't go down. It's for another day. So let's just talk about that independence, and let's just puncture that bubble immediately. WESA cannot be independent in any way, shape, or form. I don't care how they structure this. The flow of money, by definition, means that it is not independent. The WESA board is basically a collective of big European organizations with money that comes from a big European media company that owns multiple esports properties. It cannot be independent. It would be like saying, hey, I am I'm McDonald's, and I'm going to start my own arbitration company where if you've ever had a bad food experience in any restaurant whatsoever, we'll offer, arbitration for that, get you refunds, whatever. And then you go, okay, that's cool. Well, actually, I had a shit Big Mac the other day. And McDonald's goes, that's weird because we couldn't find any evidence of that. Now, it might be if you've got an issue with Burger King or any competitors or any other fast food restaurants or any of the main restaurants, this arbitration body that's funded by this company might work for you. But nobody is ever going to rule contrary to their interests. I don't care how independent you claim to be. It's simply not likely. It's simply implausible. And that's a terrible analogy, but I think you get the point. This is a absurd fantasy when we talk about independence, when the flow of money comes from a bunch of people and a very reserved and elite group have a vested interest in the outcomes. To bring it into esports terms, let's say, for example, I am a player or a piece of talent or whatever, and I have a dispute with Fnatic, who are a founder member of WESA. Is WESA going to rule against them? Probably not. I would be amazed if that were the case. It would have to be something incredibly indefensible. And keep in mind that all the while, the financial ties of Jens Hilgers being on the ESL board, having financial interests in multiple teams, multiple businesses. I mean, WESA has remained very stony-lipped over it. And this just makes me believe that this sprawl of financial conflict of interest, it's just another day at the office, actually, for WESA. They don't care about it. They're not doing anything to address it. And we're supposed to believe that independence will exist when the time comes for you to use it. The other thing here is they talk a lot about prize money. And prize money distribution, well, that would be down to ESL. Is WESA going to rule against ESL if they don't distribute prize money in the allotted time frame in the agreed manner? I remember, and certainly this hasn't been the case for many, many years, but I remember when it was a matter of course, actually, that ESL were deferring payments left, right, and center. ESL, had to basically rob Peter to pay Paul all of the time, and certain games were given priority over other games. Most notably, Counter-Strike Source players were told to go fuck themselves very openly, actually, in politely worded emails, because they needed to fund StarCraft events. Let's say that were to happen again. Let's say ESL's finances were to take a sudden dip, or that their sponsors and their business partners weren't able to make book and pay up. And players go, well, and organizations indeed go to this arbitration committee. Are they going to rule against ESL? Of course not. I mean, I think, again, you would be living in La La Land if you think that would happen. I'm pretty sure the ruling would be something very neutral, like, well, I think we should rule that we give ESL enough time to pay this, but we will strongly sanction them and write them a letter, and that'll be it. So let's move forward and just talk a little bit about some of the other ideas here. All decisions that are made at the end of the arbitration committee are final, as in there are no appeals. Well, this is actually pointless, and as somebody that's worked in this field before, this actually flies contrary to what an arbitration court, an arbitrary body, would need to have. You would all losing parties have to have the right to appeal. For example, I used to work as a shop steward for people in employment, and there's a thing in Britain called ACAS, where if you're having a dispute with your employer, you can get impartial advice, and let's say, for example, you believe you've got a case of unfair dismissal, they'll act as the mediator and the go-between, and they'll suggest a reasonable amount of financial settlement. They'll handle that. Now, if you're unhappy with the ruling, if you're and you don't want to accept that money, obviously you have the chance to an appeal, and it's the same for almost anything in any court. You have to have the right of appeal. No appeal, it renders the process redundant, because you're effectively saying our ruling will be infallible. It will be the correct ruling the first time around, regardless of who is brought in to represent counsel. And let's just talk about that imbalance. I'm a player, okay? Who is going to represent the player? Keep in mind, we have no individual agents, really, as of the moment. We certainly can't get a player to be represented by his manager, because that's an absurd power imbalance. I do not trust the majority of team owners or managers to look after their own players to the fullest extent, for obvious reasons. Will they bring in other players? Will they bring in a coach? I mean, regardless of who does the representation, the chances are the player is going to go against a organization, a tournament organizer, a company of some sorts, and they're going to have way better counsel. They're going to have way better representation. So you're entitled to have somebody represent you, but it doesn't say there's actually going to be people available that you can get on retainer or anything like that. And on top of that, it also says it's going to be an impartial panel of 3 arbitrators. Well, where are these arbitrators going to come from? What guarantees their impartiality? I think Sam will remember hilariously when Pietro Fringuelli, the person that Mr. Hirschman took over from, who also claimed to be impartial while having done legal work for ESL, and I believe also Ralph Reichart on a personal basis, but I could be incorrect about that. When asked what guarantees your impartiality, what was the answer?
Nothing.
Nothing. There you go. So I'd be very interested to see what guarantees the impartiality of these 3 arbitrators, which they haven't even said what the criteria for picking an arbitrator is going to be, where they're going to come from. It seems a bit ridiculous. And of course, the other thing that's happening, which does make me a little bit sad, because I think we can all agree that there is an element of pressure on the players right now. I see a lot of players coming out and saying, oh, this is going to be great, and this is going to be awesome. And I know they don't genuinely believe that. At best, they're cautiously optimistic. But unfortunately, the problem you've got is when your employer is a paid-up member of the association, when the association is paying somebody a salary or a financial inducement to act as a representative, you have to take everything they say with a pinch of salt. And certainly there's nothing that has been outlined in this arbitration court that makes me think this is going to be a game changer, revolutionary. It might be the first, but it is absolutely flawed, as everything relating to WESA so far has been. So just to, if you don't believe, my opinions on it, obviously Bryce Blum chimed in because that's what he does, and we love him very much for it. He gave his opinion and basically outlined in a Reddit post what arbitration is, why it's used in sports, and this kind of thing. And he said here, I'll just read this paragraph. It's particularly interesting. Sports present a unique set of challenges when disputes arise. An athlete's career is short, and the disputes surrounding what team they play for or whether they are a free agent could necessarily impact the ecosystem in a more immediate sense than in many typical judicial disputes. Sports and esports don't have time for a 3-year court case to reach final resolution. That's the other thing that this WESA arbitration court hasn't said. Timeframes. How quickly can we resolve stuff? You can deliberately delay something to basically induce an outcome. Well, what do you mean by that, Richard? Well, for example, look at what happened in E-League with the Luminosity and SK Gaming case. Let's say, for example, it would benefit a member of WESA for an arbitration ruling to be delayed, and so a team couldn't move to a new organization and couldn't compete in a different league. How are we supposed to know or believe that if, let's just say that happened, that it wasn't done deliberately to benefit that member of WESA? These are all the problems, you see. If you can ask the question, if you can imagine the corruption, the conflict of interest, then your system is flawed, and you need to alter it. It says, moreover, having the ability to respond to issues in a timely manner actually deters wrongful behavior. Very few people in esports are afraid of getting sued, in large part because they know the cost and time associated with litigation renders it largely ineffective as an opportunity to redress the most common types of grievances. Establishing an expedited, specialized dispute resolution mechanism helps address these concerns. And again, that's right. The amount of times I've said to players, that contract's bullshit, and certainly this organization isn't going to take you to court over it, is quite startling. In addition to that, I mean, the amount of times players have been absolutely wrecked by organizations and simply don't have the courage or the means to break away and take them to court over outstanding money and that kind of thing. It's a low risk to be corrupt in esports, and that's pretty much what Bryce echoes there. So he talks about these characteristics of alternative dispute resolution, which I think are important, and we'll get into that. But just want to mention a little bit about the publishers. I don't really see what the publishers would get out of this, and I honestly believe that the publishers coming to the table, if any publisher would want to come to the table, would hold a disparate amount of power. they themselves are very much used to having complete dominion over their game because they can invoke the intellectual property ruling. And until somebody challenges it in court and says, actually, gameplay and running a league and this kind of thing, running an esports environment associated with your in-game is transformative, until we get that ruling one way or the other, no one's challenged it yet, to my knowledge, the publisher's always going to be the big swinging dick in the debate. There's no need for a publisher to come with a third-party arbitration court. Their game, their rules, unfortunately. And I can't envision a scenario where a publisher would come to a third-party arbitration to begin with, and then if they did and a party ruled against them, they would go, yeah, okay, fine, that's great, WESA. By the way, yeah, actually, no, we thought about it and we realized we're much bigger than you. Get fucked. So it seems to me that almost extending the invitation to developers is kind of pointless. It's never going to get utilized on that level. Makes it seem important. The realities of how it'll play out are very different. So the characteristics as outlined by Bryce Blum are that hearings should be granted in all cases, unless otherwise requested by the parties. Absolutely. Once a grievance has been filed, a hearing must take place within a short period of time. He recommends 30 days. I believe it should be shorter because 30 days is a long time in esports. I like the secondary one where we're talking about 10 days. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to get your shit together. Every party should be given the full and equal opportunity to present any relevant evidence. Absolutely. Goes without saying. Every party should have the right to be represented by counsel. Also goes without saying. Evidence should be taken in the presence of all parties to the dispute. That's absolutely correct. To make sure it's not... how should we say, tampered with or false or artificial. This ties into recent rulings we've seen from Riot. A lot of people remember the Renegade situation and still are perplexed as to why I support Riot's decision. But as I've always said, your process can be terrible and you can still arrive at the right decision. You know, for example, a killer could come to court. There could be no evidence to convict him whatsoever. He could be an absolute asshole in court and be convicted by the jury because they don't like him. And the conviction is terrible. The process is terrible, but it's actually right. He did do it. It's just there's no evidence to substantiate the fact he did. Testimony should be given under oath. This is slightly problematic for me. I understand that is what would happen in a court and everything. I don't understand what oath you would kind of swear on here in this particular setting or environment, or what the penalties for lying would necessarily be, other than expulsion from ever using this voluntary service again. It seems a bit vague. I don't really see any of that as unenforceable. In fact, one of the key roles that I think the arbitrator should be really looking at is just securing and making sure evidence is accurate and testimony holds up. I think there needs to be a degree of common sense applied that, okay, well, this can't possibly be true. That could be true. You have to know what's being presented is accurate. And anybody swearing on Almighty God is not... Almighty God doesn't exist in esports, does he? Let's be real. A neutral decision maker, which is the independently hired arbitrator, should be involved at some stage in the process. And again, they're saying the people we appoint will be independent. What Bryce is saying here is that actually, regardless of that, there should be a true independent. And I don't think that'll happen. Decisions should be rendered as soon as reasonably practicable, but no later than 1 week. And also, you need a quick decision. You need to know the way it goes. It's absolutely right. And the losing party should have the opportunity to appeal, which, of course, we know it won't. So there's a lot going on here, I think, and I'm loath to say this, but I almost feel this is a way to grab headlines and create that illusion of legitimacy. I think it's very important. You know, it's kind of like the drugs testing thing all over again for me. It's never been a problem until it was a problem, and now we have testing at ESL events, and no one's going to get caught ever because it doesn't behoove anyone to do that. And indeed, you know, privately, Riot employees have told me, you know, they'd be afraid to implement drugs testing in their league, especially in North America, because they know they don't believe there's a single team that could enter 5 clean players. That's coming from Riot employees themselves. So, you know, it's these little things that it's like, it all looks good. It all sounds good. It gets you a ton of coverage, which, by the way, it definitely did. I mean, this is reported everywhere in the mainstream press, all reported on the same day. It was obviously one of those things that was announced, that was under embargo with people, and out it comes, and there's no further clarification. And just to kind of wrap this video up as to why I'm very, very cynical about this, as is my nature anyway, there are too many financial links and too many stakeholders involved in WESA for it to ever be truly independent if anybody actually comes from WESA in making the decision. So you almost render it invalid. It'd be better if actually teams and organizations had a whip round financially and gave their money to a legal firm with no ties to anybody in esports and said, this is the money in the pot. You will act as an independent arbitrator in all disputes pertaining to esports. That makes way more sense than having WESA handle it, because they're too tainted. That they are not clean or impartial. That would be my suggestion moving forward. I would urge organizations to have a long, hard think about that. It may be hard to find somebody impartial with the requisite level of knowledge to deal with these things, but I honestly don't think it will be. And I certainly think anybody that uses this WESA arbitration court is probably going to run up against a decision that they don't like. This seems to be about serving a very select group of people. I don't think it's going to be a big game changer. I don't think it's going to help player rights. And honestly, I don't think it's going to get used all that much because people can see through this kind of veil of what it's allegedly supposed to be. Anyway, just a few thoughts about that one. Thanks a lot for listening. See you on the next video.